What if the people who upset you the most were never the real problem? What if the moment you understand one truth, no one can trigger you again? Picture this: the same criticism, the same disrespect, the same chaos, yet something inside you no longer reacts. You don't fight emotions, you don't suppress them. You simply end emotional reactions at the root. Buddhist teachings reveal why trying to control emotions fails, and how to react to nothing without becoming numb. Pain begins when the mind argues with reality. Why do certain words still shake you? Why do some situations steal your peace? Buddhism shows how to master your emotions, become emotionally powerful, and become unaffected, without force. Stay until the end, because one overlooked lesson will quietly change how you experience everything. 1. Triggers are mirrors, not weapons. Why do the same words, the same faces, the same situations keep provoking the same emotional storms, no matter how much you promise yourself to stay calm? You tell yourself you have grown, you tell yourself you understand. Yet the moment arrives, and the mind ignites again. Let this question sit quietly within you. What is really being touched? In Buddhist understanding, no one truly triggers you, not because others are kind, but because they are powerless. What you call a trigger is not a weapon aimed at you. It is a mirror held steady. The mind does not react to the world, it reacts to itself. The pain you feel is not new, it is familiar. It returns to where it is recognized. Consider this truth gently. A trigger is like a bell, silent, harmless, until struck by something already vibrating inside you. The bell does not create the sound, it only reveals it. In the same way, situations do not create your anger, fear, or sadness. They only awaken what has been waiting, unseen, within your own awareness. This is where suffering quietly repeats itself. We spend our lives blaming the bell, the words, the people, the circumstances. We demand silence from the world while refusing to listen inward. And so the same lesson appears again and again, until it is finally understood. Buddhist wisdom reminds us, pain returns to where it is recognized. When irritation arises, it is not an enemy, it is information. When jealousy appears, it is not weakness, it is an invitation. Nothing outside you has power until you hand it your awareness without mindfulness. Close your eyes for a moment. Recall a recent emotional reaction. Do not explain it. Do not justify it. Watch it arise. Let it exist without naming it good or bad. This simple witnessing is where freedom begins. In daily life, this practice becomes practical. When someone speaks sharply, pause before reacting. Ask, what inside me is being touched? When disappointment appears, breathe and observe the sensation rather than the story. When fear rises, stay present long enough to feel it dissolve instead of obeying it. Here is the quiet reversal most people miss. The moment you stop trying to eliminate triggers, they lose their power. Because once seen clearly, the mind no longer mistakes reflection for attack. The unshaken mind does not resist the storm. It simply no longer lives inside it. Ask yourself now, what emotion keeps repeating in my life? What part of me is still asking to be seen? If this trigger were a teacher, what is it showing me? When you take responsibility for your inner world, something profound happens. Calm becomes stable. Reactions soften. The mind grows disciplined, not through force, but through understanding. And the truth settles in gently, like dusk after a long day. No one can trigger you, once you stop running from what is within. 2. Control tightens the knot. Why does anger return stronger after you suppress it? Why does the emotion you tried so hard to control come back with sharper teeth and deeper weight? Sit with this question, not to solve it quickly, but to feel its truth. The mind believes control creates peace, yet the heart knows otherwise. In Buddhist understanding, control tightens the knot. The moment you try to dominate an emotion, you enter into conflict with your own inner world. Control is not strength. Control is resistance. And resistance gives emotions something solid to push against. What you fight gains weight. Notice how force feeds suffering. You clench your jaw to hold back anger. You swallow sadness to appear strong. You distract yourself from fear with productivity. Yet none of it disappears. It waits. It gathers pressure. Then it returns, louder, heavier, more demanding than before. Trying to control emotion is like squeezing water in your fist. The tighter you grip, the faster it escapes, soaking the ground beneath you, spreading silently, uncontrollably. You think you are managing it, but it is already shaping your reactions, your tone, your decisions. Buddhist wisdom does not ask you to obey emotions, nor to exile them. It asks you to understand them. Because the untrained mind believes emotions must be defeated, while the trained mind sees they must be felt, without ownership, without judgment. Pause here. Breathe slowly. Notice any tension in the chest. Do not push it away. Do not analyze it. Soften around it without trying to change it. This is not weakness. This is discipline of awareness. In daily life, control often disguises itself as maturity. You tell yourself, "I'm fine," while the body tightens. You say, "It doesn't matter," while resentment quietly builds. But suppression is not peace. It is postponed suffering. Here is the turning point most people miss. Allowing does not mean agreeing. Feeling anger does not mean acting on it. Allowing fear does not mean surrendering to it. When you stop resisting, the emotion has nothing to push against. And when there is nothing to push against, it begins to dissolve on its own. This is why Buddhist practice emphasizes observation over domination. Sit with what arises. Watch how it moves. See how every emotion, when met with awareness instead of control, reveals its impermanence. Ask yourself now, what emotion am I trying to dominate instead of understand? Where has control failed me before? What happens if I allow without agreeing? When you release the need to control your inner weather, something subtle shifts. The mind loosens, the body softens, clarity replaces tension. You no longer wrestle with yourself. And in that quiet space, a disciplined calm is born. One that no emotion needs to fear and no trigger can command. 3. The past is borrowing your voice. Why does one small moment awaken a reaction far larger than the situation itself? A tone of voice, a delayed reply, a look that lingers half a second too long. And suddenly the body tightens, the breath shortens, and the mind rushes to defend. This is not the present speaking. This is the past borrowing your voice. In Buddhist understanding, memory masquerades as now. The mind is skilled at pulling old pain forward and dressing it in today's circumstances. What appears to be a fresh wound is often an echo. The mind relives what the body remembers. Every reaction is an old wound wearing today's clothes. The argument at work is not just about words. The silence in a relationship is not just about absence. Something older is being touched, something that once learned how to protect itself by reacting first, thinking later. This is how suffering quietly multiplies. You believe you are responding to what is happening, but you are defending against what already happened. The past steps into the present, unannounced, and the body obeys before awareness arrives. Buddhist practice invites you to slow this moment down, not to analyze the story, but to feel the timing. Notice your breath. Ask quietly, is this from now or from before? Do not search for answers. Let the body respond without words. When you stay with this question, a subtle clarity appears. The chest softens, the urgency weakens. You begin to see that the present moment on its own is rarely as dangerous as it feels. It is familiar because it resembles something unresolved, not because it is truly a threat. Here is the turning point. The moment you recognize that the past is speaking, you stop letting it make decisions for you. Awareness interrupts the habit. Presence loosens the grip. You are no longer trapped in replay. You are standing in choice. In daily life, this changes everything. When irritation arises, you pause before reacting. When fear appears, you check whether it belongs to now. When sadness surfaces, you offer it space instead of explanation. This is not denial. This is precision. Buddhist wisdom teaches that freedom does not come from erasing memory, but from no longer mistaking it for reality. When the mind stops dragging yesterday into today, the present regains its natural calm. Ask yourself now, what past experience is replaying through this emotion? Is the present truly dangerous or just familiar? What happens when I stay here instead of there? As you practice this seeing, reactions soften without effort. The voice of the past grows quieter. The mind becomes disciplined, not through control, but through clarity. And in that clarity, you discover a powerful truth. The present moment has been peaceful all along. You are simply listening to another time. Identity gives emotion its throne. Why do emotions feel so powerful, almost commanding, when they arise? Why does a single feeling suddenly dictate your words, your posture, your decisions? Sit with this mystery. The power does not come from the emotion itself. It comes from the throne you give it. In Buddhist understanding, identity gives emotion its authority. The moment a feeling appears, the mind rushes to claim it. I am angry. I am anxious. I am broken. In that instant, emotion stops being a passing experience and becomes a ruler. What you claim as self begins to command you. Emotion is only a guest, but identity hands it the keys to the house. Once inside, it rearranges your thoughts, speaks through your mouth, and convinces you it belongs there permanently. Not because it is strong, but because you have crowned it. Notice how this happens in daily life. Anger arrives, and suddenly you believe you are anger. Fear appears, and you shrink your world to its size. Sadness visits, and you rewrite your identity around it. The emotion has not changed. Your relationship to it has. Buddhist practice offers a precise shift. Not suppression, not expression, but disidentification. Label the feeling softly. Anger is here. Not, I am angry. Feel the difference immediately. The body loosens. The mind steps back. Space returns. This small change restores balance. When you stop merging with emotion, it loses its authority. It can speak, but it cannot rule. It can arise, but it cannot decide. You remain the witness, not the story. Here is the deeper truth most people overlook. Emotions feel permanent only when identity traps them in place. When identity steps aside, impermanence reveals itself. What was loud begins to fade. What felt overwhelming begins to move. In real life, this becomes a powerful discipline. When frustration arises at work, Name it without ownership. When insecurity appears in relationships, observe it without introduction. When doubt surfaces, let it pass without signing your name to it. This is not detachment from life, it is intimacy with reality. Buddhist wisdom teaches that peace is not the absence of emotion. It is the absence of confusion about who you are. When emotions come and go, something remains, something steady, something untouched. Ask yourself now, what emotions have I mistaken for who I am? Who am I when emotions come and go? What remains when I stop labeling? As you practice this seeing, the mind grows disciplined without force. Calm becomes natural. Reactions soften. You stop being ruled by passing weather and begin to live from the sky that contains it. And in that quiet clarity, the final truth settles in gently. No emotion was ever your enemy. It only ruled you when you called it me. 5. Awareness dissolves authority. What happens to emotion when it is watched instead of acted upon? When you do not feed it words, movement, or reaction, when you simply remain present, stay with this question. It opens a door most people never step through. In Buddhist understanding, awareness dissolves authority. Emotions draw strength from unconscious action. They need resistance, expression, or identification to survive. When awareness arrives, the fuel disappears. What is seen clearly begins to weaken. Light does not argue with darkness, it reveals. In the same way, awareness does not fight emotion, it illuminates it. And what is illuminated can no longer pretend to be in control. Emotion is like morning fog, dense, convincing, and heavy at first glance. Awareness is sunlight. It does not push the fog away, it simply shines. And slowly, without effort, the fog thins, lifts, and disappears. Sit quietly for a moment. Watch sensations rise and fall in the body. Heat, tightness, movement. Do nothing else. Do not label. Do not interfere. Simply watch. This is not passivity. This is precision. Notice what happens. The urge to react weakens. The story loses urgency. The emotion shifts, changes shape, or fades entirely. Not because you forced it, but because awareness removed its unconscious momentum. This is where true inner strength develops. Most people believe strength means control or expression. Buddhist wisdom reveals a deeper power, the ability to stay, to remain present 10 seconds longer than the habit demands, to watch without obeying. In daily life, this practice is transformative. When irritation appears, pause and observe the sensation before speaking. When fear arises, feel it in the body without moving away. When sadness comes, sit with it without trying to heal it. Awareness becomes the response. Here is the quiet turning point. The more consistently you observe, the less authority emotions have over you. They still arise, but they no longer command. They appear, change, and pass like weather, moving through an open sky. Ask yourself now, can I stay without reacting for 10 seconds longer? What changes when I simply observe? Who is watching this emotion? As this understanding deepens, the mind grows calm without effort. Discipline becomes natural. Positivity stops being forced. You are no longer dragged by internal storms, you are standing in clear seeing. And this is the truth that ends reactivity at its root. When awareness becomes steady, nothing inside you needs to be fought. Nothing outside you needs to be feared. Because the moment you see clearly, authority dissolves and peace takes its place. 6. Reaction is a habit, not a command. Why do reactions feel automatic, almost inevitable? Why does the body move before the mind has time to choose? Sit with this honestly. What feels like destiny is often repetition. Reaction is not a command. It is a habit. In Buddhist understanding, conditioning repeats itself. The nervous system learns through exposure, not truth. Each time you react the same way, the pathway deepens. Not because it is right, but because it is familiar. Habit speaks louder than wisdom, until wisdom is practiced. A reaction is a worn footpath in the mind, not a destination. It feels natural only because it has been walked so many times before. The anger that rises quickly, the defensiveness that appears instantly, the withdrawal that feels protective. These are not orders, they are grooves. This is why insight alone does not free you. Understanding without practice leaves habits intact. The mind may know better, but the body continues as trained. Freedom begins when awareness enters the moment before reaction. Today, pause before responding. Take one breath longer than usual. Feel the impulse without obeying it. Choose silence if you are unsure. This small interruption weakens the habit more than any argument with yourself ever could. In that pause, something new becomes possible. The body recalibrates. The mind regains choice. You realize the reaction was never mandatory. It was simply fast. Speed gave it the illusion of authority. Buddhist practice trains patience at the level of sensation. When the urge appears, you stay. You do not suppress it. You do not express it. You let it crest and fall. Each time you do this, the old footpath grows less traveled. Here is the unexpected turning point. The more you pause, the less dramatic emotions become. They still arise, but they no longer rush you. The nervous system learns safety in stillness. Calm becomes the new habit. In daily life, this rewires everything. Conversations slow. Choices feel cleaner. You stop apologizing for reactions you never wanted. Discipline emerges, not from force, but from repetition of awareness. Ask yourself now, what reaction has become my default? What happens if I pause once? Who do I become in that pause? Over time, wisdom grows louder than habit. The mind becomes trained in clarity. And one quiet day, you notice something profound. The trigger appears, but nothing follows. Not because you resisted, but because the old path finally faded. And in that space, you discover who you are without reaction. 7. The ego gains something from reacting. If reactions cause suffering, why does the mind cling to them so tightly? Why return to patterns that exhaust you again and again? This question cuts deeper than emotion. It points to identity. The ego gains something from reacting. In Buddhist understanding, reactions reward identity. Each reaction confirms a story about who you are. The angry one, the strong one, the victim, the one who must defend. And even when these stories hurt, they feel familiar. The ego prefers familiarity over peace. Reaction is the ego's echo, proof it still exists. When someone challenges you and anger rises, the ego feels solid. When you are offended, the self feels defined. When you justify yourself, identity feels protected. Suffering becomes the cost of feeling real. This is why letting go feels uncomfortable. Without reaction, the ego momentarily loses its shape. There is no role to play, no position to defend. The mind calls this danger, but it is only unfamiliar space. Notice the urge to react. Pause. Ask quietly, what am I gaining? Are you gaining control, superiority, validation, safety? Stay with the discomfort instead of answering quickly. This is where honesty lives. Buddhist practice does not ask you to destroy the ego. It asks you to see its strategy. When the strategy is seen, it weakens. Awareness exposes how reaction is used to stabilize a fragile sense of self. Here is the unexpected reversal. The moment you stop reacting, nothing bad happens. The world does not collapse. You do not disappear. Instead, something softer appears. Spaciousness, calm, a self not built on defense. In daily life, this insight is powerful. When provoked, you recognize the temptation to react as a craving for identity. You breathe, you remain. You let the moment pass without feeding the story. Each time you do this, the ego loosens its grip. Over time, you begin to sense the deeper safety Buddhist wisdom points to. Safety that does not depend on being right. Strength that does not require reaction. Peace that does not need proof. Ask yourself now, what reward does my reaction secretly offer me? Am I protecting truth or identity? What happens if I let identity soften? As this understanding matures, reactions lose their sweetness. Silence becomes rich, stillness becomes stable, and you discover a quiet truth beneath it all. When identity no longer needs to be confirmed, peace no longer needs to be earned. 8. Silence interrupts the cycle. What is the most powerful response when you are provoked? When words are sharp, when emotions rise, when the body prepares to defend. What truly ends the cycle? Stay with this question. The answer is not action, not explanation, not even restraint. It is conscious stillness. In Buddhist understanding, silence interrupts the cycle. Reactions feed on momentum. Words accelerate emotion. Movement confirms conflict. Stillness breaks the chain at its root. In silence, the mind forgets how to fight. Silence is not weakness. It is precision. It is the pause where the arrow falls before reaching its target. When there is no reaction to meet it, aggression loses direction. When there is no echo, the noise collapses back into itself. Notice how often suffering continues simply because something must be said. A reply, a justification, a defense. Yet every word adds fuel. Every explanation tightens the knot. Silence removes the ground emotion stands on. Feel your breath. Relax the jaw. Let silence answer first. This is not avoidance. This is mastery. You are not swallowing truth. You are choosing the right moment to let truth speak, or not speak at all. Buddhist practice teaches that stillness is an action of awareness. When you remain silent, you stay present with sensation instead of escaping into reaction. You feel the urge rise, peak, and fall. And in that falling, freedom appears. Here is the unexpected turning point. Silence does not make you invisible. It makes you clear. When you do not react, others reveal themselves. The moment exposes what is driven by emotion and what is grounded in awareness. In daily life, silence becomes a disciplined tool. When criticized, you pause. When misunderstood, you breathe. When tempted to prove yourself, you remain still. Each time, the nervous system learns safety without defense. This practice changes relationships, work, and inner dialogue. Conflicts shorten, regret fades, energy returns. You stop leaking power through unnecessary reaction. Ask yourself now, can silence be my strength today? What do I notice when I do not respond? Who benefits when I remain still? As you deepen this practice, you realize silence is not empty. It is full of intelligence, full of restraint, full of calm authority. And one day, you notice something subtle and profound. The trigger appears, but the cycle never begins, because stillness arrived first. And in that stillness, the mind remembers peace. 9. Non-reaction is not weakness. Does not reacting mean allowing injustice or disrespect? Many believe silence equals surrender, that calm is weakness dressed as patience. Sit with this carefully. Non-reaction is not absence of strength, it is strength refined. In Buddhist understanding, peace is power. Reaction acts quickly but blindly. Clarity moves slowly but accurately. When you do not react, you are not freezing. You are choosing the quality of your response. Still water reflects clearly. A mountain does not argue with the storm, it remains. Wind may howl, rain may strike, yet the mountain does not collapse into movement. From that steadiness comes true authority. In the same way, your calm becomes unshakable when it is rooted in awareness. Non-reaction does not mean inaction. It means you no longer let emotion decide the timing, tone, or direction of your response. You wait until the mind clears. And when you act, it is deliberate, not explosive. Stand tall. Feel grounded through the feet. Let emotions pass overhead like clouds. They may darken the sky, but they do not change the ground beneath you. This is the posture of inner power. Buddhist practice trains this distinction with precision. When provoked, you observe the surge of emotion without obeying it. You allow clarity to surface before speaking or moving. This pause transforms conflict into choice. Here is the turning point many never reach. When you stop reacting, others sense it, not as passivity, but as presence. Your words carry weight because they are not rushed. Your boundaries strengthen because they are not fueled by anger. In daily life, this redefines strength. You address injustice without hatred. You say no without aggression. You walk away without resentment. Calm sharpens your actions instead of dulling them. Ask yourself now, where have I mistaken calm for weakness? What strength emerges without anger? How does clarity change my actions? As this understanding deepens, the nervous system relaxes. The mind becomes disciplined. You stop being dragged into battles you never needed to fight. Peace stops being a retreat. It becomes a position. And here is the final truth to let sink in. When you no longer react, nothing outside you can control your inner state. You act when needed. You remain silent when wise. You move without disturbance. Like the mountain, you do not need to prove your strength. You simply remain, and that remaining becomes unshakable power. 10. Emotional freedom creates focus. What happens when emotional leaks stop draining you? When the constant pull of reaction, rumination, and inner conflict finally loosens its grip. Sit with this quietly. Something profound begins to change, not emotionally, but structurally. Emotional freedom creates focus. In Buddhist understanding, energy returns inward when it is no longer scattered outward. Every reaction leaks attention. Every resentment splits the mind. Every emotional replay pulls power away from the present moment. When reaction ends, energy consolidates. Where attention no longer bleeds, power gathers. Most people feel exhausted not because life is heavy, but because their energy is divided. A part of the mind is always elsewhere, replaying, defending, anticipating. This fragmentation weakens focus. Clarity fades. Decisions feel difficult, not because you are incapable, but because your power is leaking. Non-reaction is like closing open doors during a storm. The wind no longer rushes through. The room grows still. And in that stillness, strength returns. Focus is not forced. It naturally sharpens when energy stops escaping. Notice where your attention scatters. Arguments replayed in the mind. Words you wish you had said. Outcomes you cannot control. Gently bring attention back to the breath. Feel stability return. This is not escape. This is reclamation. Buddhist practice reveals that peace is not passive. It is efficient. When emotions no longer dominate the nervous system, the mind becomes precise. You see what matters. You act without hesitation. You conserve energy for what is essential. Here is the turning point few recognize. Emotional freedom does not dull ambition. It refines it. Without inner noise, goals become clearer. Without reactivity, effort becomes focused. Without distraction, discipline strengthens. In daily life, this shift is unmistakable. Work feels lighter, decisions feel cleaner. You stop procrastinating, not because you push harder, but because resistance dissolves. Energy once spent reacting is now available for building. This is how inner peace translates into outer strength. You wake up less scattered. You move with intention. You complete what you start. Calm becomes a strategic advantage. Ask yourself now, where is my energy leaking emotionally? What could I build with reclaimed focus? How does peace sharpen ambition? As this understanding deepens, you no longer chase motivation. You embody it. Focus becomes stable. The mind becomes disciplined. And the final truth settles in quietly but firmly. When nothing inside you is fighting, everything you do gains power. This is the reward of emotional freedom. Not numbness, not withdrawal, but a collected mind, a steady heart, and energy aligned with purpose. When no one can trigger you, nothing drains you. And when nothing drains you, your life finally moves forward with clarity, strength, and calm. 11. Triggers lose their job. What happens to triggers once their message is understood? When the same emotional alarm no longer startles you, no longer demands attention. Sit with this. The end of triggering is not suppression. It is comprehension. In Buddhist understanding, understanding ends repetition. Triggers do not exist to punish you. They exist to teach, and lessons repeat until they are learned. Once the mind truly sees what was being asked of it, the cycle no longer has a reason to continue. A trigger is like a teacher who raises the same question again and again. Each time you avoid it, the question returns louder. Each time you fight it, the lesson sharpens. But the moment insight arrives, the teacher bows and leaves. Notice this in your own life. Recall an old trigger, a comment that once cut deeply, a situation that once stole your peace. Now observe its diminished charge. The body no longer tightens as before. The mind no longer rushes to defend. This is not numbness. This is growth. Triggers lose their job when awareness replaces reaction. When you no longer confuse emotion for threat. When you stop identifying with the story it carries. The trigger appears, finds no grip, and quietly dissolves. Buddhist wisdom points to this with precision. Suffering persists, not because life is cruel, but because insight is incomplete. When insight matures, suffering has nowhere to land. Here is the turning point many miss. Freedom is not the absence of challenging moments. It is the absence of unconscious response. When the response changes, the stimulus loses relevance. In daily life, this feels like lightness. You encounter the same world, but it no longer provokes the same inner storms. The past stops demanding repayment. The mind no longer rehearses old battles. Pause now. Acknowledge growth silently. Notice what no longer controls you. This quiet recognition strengthens clarity more than praise ever could. Ask yourself, Which trigger feels weaker than before? What lesson has already been learned? What no longer needs to happen again? As understanding deepens, triggers stop knocking. Not because you are hiding, but because there is nothing left to say. The message has been received. The pattern has been seen through. And here is the final truth to let sink in. When triggers lose their job, peace becomes normal. Calm becomes stable. The mind stands free, not from life, but from repetition. The teacher departs, the lesson remains, and you walk forward lighter, no longer dragged backward by what has already been understood. Bonus lesson. Unshaken is the highest power. What does true emotional mastery finally feel like? Not control, not numbness, not superiority. It feels like nothing left to defend. Sit with this gently. This is the highest power Buddhism points toward, being unshaken. In Buddhist understanding, strength is measured by stability, not force. When reactions fade, the mind no longer needs armor. There is no urge to prove, correct, or protect an image. Freedom arrives quietly, without announcement. When nothing moves you, you move wisely. The unshaken mind does not resist life. It stands present within it. Praise may come, blame may arise, circumstances may shift, yet nothing hooks deeply enough to pull you off center. This is not indifference, it is clarity without attachment. Like a candle in still air, bright, unwavering, complete, no flicker, no struggle. The flame does not fight the air, it simply rests in its own nature. This is what emotional mastery looks like when it matures. Sit quietly now. Feel steadiness within. Notice that beneath emotion, beneath thought, something remains untouched. Rest there. This is not something you create, it is something you stop abandoning. Here is the final turning point. When there is nothing left to defend, life no longer feels threatening. You listen more deeply, you respond more accurately, you act when needed, and remain still when action would only add noise. In daily life, this changes everything. Conflict loses its grip. Urgency dissolves. You no longer rush to fill silence or fix perception. Your presence alone becomes grounding, not only for you, but for others. This is why Buddhist wisdom emphasizes inner stability over external victory. The world may remain unpredictable, but the mind no longer depends on outcomes to feel safe. Peace becomes self-sustaining. Ask yourself now, who am I without emotional defense? What becomes possible when I am unshaken? What truth do I now understand? As these questions settle, something final integrates. You are no longer practicing calm, you are living from it. The disciplined mind is no longer effortful. The positive mind is no longer forced. And here is the truth to let sink in completely. When you are unshaken, nothing outside needs to change. You do not withdraw from life, you meet it from clarity, quiet, grounded, free. This is not the end of the path. It is the place you finally stand, fully present, with nothing left to prove and nothing left to protect. Quick summary of the principles. Triggers are mirrors, not weapons. What affects you reveals what still lives within you. No one places emotion inside you without permission. Awareness begins the moment blame ends. Control tightens the knot. Trying to suppress emotions gives them resistance and strength. What is resisted continues to return. Understanding dissolves what force cannot. The past is borrowing your voice. Most reactions are memories replaying through the present. The mind confuses familiarity with reality. Freedom begins when you stay in now. Identity gives emotion. Authority. Emotions dominate only when you call them me. Separation creates space. Space creates freedom. You are the observer, not the experience. Awareness dissolves authority. Seen emotions lose momentum naturally. Observation replaces reaction without effort. Clarity weakens emotional compulsion. Reaction is a conditioned habit. Emotional reactions are learned responses, not truths. What was practiced unconsciously can be unlearned consciously. Pause interrupts conditioning. Ego benefits from reaction. Reaction reinforces identity and self-image. The ego prefers validation over peace. Seeing this removes its leverage. Stillness ends the cycle. Silence prevents emotions from escalating. Not every impulse requires expression. Stillness restores inner command. Non-reaction is strength. Calmness allows intelligent response. Emotional restraint is clarity, not avoidance. True power acts without inner noise. Emotional freedom restores focus. Unreactive minds conserve energy. Focus sharpens when emotions stop draining attention. Peace enhances performance. Triggers disappear. When understood, repeated emotional patterns exist to teach awareness. Once the lesson is integrated, repetition ends. Understanding completes the cycle. Unshaken is the highest power. Nothing external controls the awakened mind. Stability replaces emotional dependence. Freedom is no longer needing to react. When this truth is fully understood, life does not become quieter, but you do. People may still test you. Circumstances may still challenge you. Yet, the inner turbulence ends because you are no longer fighting emotions or obeying them. Zen teaches that freedom is not found in changing conditions, but in seeing clearly. When the mind stops identifying with every wave, the ocean becomes calm by itself. You do not need to control your thoughts. You only need to stop letting them control you. Today, practice one conscious pause, one moment of non-reaction, one breath before response. That single space is where mastery begins. If this teaching resonated with you, like this video, share it with someone who needs inner peace, and share your thoughts in the comments below.